Welcome to Codeuix. Today we will cover some basic HTML concepts that every web developer needs to master. Concepts that we'll be discussing in this video are as follows. What is HTML? Syntax to write an HTML code. Various HTML elements that are available. What are attributes and how we can include them in our HTML elements. And we'll also be looking at how to style our HTML elements using style attributes. And finally, guys, we will be building and demo web page using only basic HTML elements and attributes. Without further ado, let's get started. Firstly, we'll be looking at what is HTML, also known as Hypertext Markup Language. HTML is a standard markup language for documents designed to display in a web browser. So in my Visual Studio Code, I've created an index.html, which is a default uh, file that will be served by an web application or a website. Let us look at the HTML boilerplate code and understand the default boilerplate. So here we have an tag called document type, which is used to define the type of the document that we are serving. Here it is an HTML document, and we have an HTML tag, which is in root of the HTML document. We have an head element which contains metadata information and the page title information. All the visible elements will be placed under body tag. There are various HTML elements that are available by default. Headings, we have a paragraph element, and we also have an ordered list, and we also have an unordered list. Anchor element, we have an image element to display the image, and we have an container element also called as div element, and there is a special element called as span. So and also there is an HTML attribute. So what is this HTML attributes? HTML attributes is nothing but an additional information that you want to provide to an HTML element. So basically, a tag can be used like an anchor tag, right? Anchor tag will have an hyperlink to a different URL. So here, how do you specify that HTML element having an hyperlink? So here you'll be using something called as href. So now let's look at how we can include this particular attributes, and we'll also look at each of the elements and how that particular elements look. Starting with our heading, we have more than like six different types of headings, starting from H1 to H6, where each of the headings is like font weight or the size of the font is different from the previous one. And we have a paragraph tag which starts with P, which can contains like multiple lines of multiple sentences like this. And our ordered list is where we'll use an tag called OL, inside which OL it states that it's an ordered list. And for the list of items needs to be placed under li element, and li can contain the text, or it can be other different elements as well. NDI, we can a div element can be placed inside this, or you can place an header element, etc. As of right now, I'll be adding just a normal content and like this. And for an unordered list, we'll be using a tag called UL, and it will also be containing an li element which can contain either of the HTML elements. And we have an anchor tag. So as you know, anchor tag will start with an a element and it ends with an a element, and here we'll be giving a name for that the content for that particular anchor tag, so which will be like Google. So here I can add an hyperlink for this particular Google, so by just using an href HTML attribute, and here I can give an hyperlink URL, which will be https google.com. So for creating an image, we'll be using an tag called img, and for image, we will be having an HTML attribute called source, where source would contain the link of the image. I have copied an generic image and I've pasted the URL of that particular image. And we also have another HTML attribute called alt. What alt does is, like, if there is any problem with displaying an image, an alt text value will be used to display the description of what the image is about. So here I can say it's like a demo image. And for our image, we also have a width and height attributes. So we can specify the width of the image, saying that it's like 300 pixel wide and it has an height of 45 pixels. And for defining our div elements, will be the name of the element will be div, and by default div doesn't have any HTML attributes, unlike our anchor element or an image element. So div can contain a normal content like paragraph, or it can contain multiple elements. So I'll say that we have an heading inside div, and we can also have a paragraph inside here. So we can have multiple paragraphs. So let me add another paragraph with the dummy content. And here we have finally we have a span element. So what span element? It's an unique, or you can say it's an extraordinary element where it can be placed inside different HTML elements, but span doesn't contain any other, cannot contain any other HTML elements inside that. So the content can be either an image or content, but not other elements like div or an ordered list, etc. So basically it will be in content. So we'll add an example of how that particular content will be added. So here I'll take an paragraph as an example. I've added an dummy content. So here I'll be placing somewhere after this. Here I'll add in span content and save it. So now we have saved it, and let me open my default HTML document page on my server. So I've opened it. As you can see here, our heading. So H1 being having an highest font and H6 having a least font size, and our paragraph containing an sentence, and here an ordered list containing from 1 to 5, unordered list containing dots to specify the this thing, and here our anchor element Google is been hyperlinked to google.com. Here you can see at the bottom it's been linked to https google.com, and here our HTML element. So you can see the width is like 300 pixels and height is 50. So there is a problem with the image width and the height. So let me just go to my code and change that particular piece. Let me remove the height from 300. Let me see, it's like 200 and the height is like 150 pixels. And here you can see that my image element came here, and my div element containing my header, paragraph, and another paragraph. And you can see my span element containing a normal content, and here my span element which is on site, and paragraph which is here. So why you use span is for styling an element. Probably you can, a paragraph can have a different color. Let's say it's white, and this span element can be red. So it can be used to like highlight the content or attract an user attention to a piece of content And we'll also be looking at some of other HTML elements that are available. Similar to our div element, we have an header and an HTML element called as header. So it has the same functionality of our div element, but giving a name as header will be useful for like specifying it in our HTML, like in our web page. So this will be used as an header section at the top of the web page. And similarly, we have an nav element. So this will be basically used for like containing all our menu items like the links, etc. And we also have a section element where a section of content can be placed inside. And we also have another HTML element called as article. So article is an independent block. It contains a set of elements that will be repeated multiple times in our web page. And finally, we also have another element called footer. So by its name, you can know what footer is all about. It's basically used to give an footer menu of an web page, or an copyright text can be placed. Let me copy all this and delete, and let's create our demo application or a demo web page which we had seen at the beginning. So here the title, we'll be changing the name of the web page to demo blog page, and here we have an header. So header will contain an div inside which we have an image with and source and an attribute. And here for a source we'll be giving a link. For like a source of an image would be a logo. So I've copy pasted a logo image URL, and the alt text can be logo. And here we'll be giving an width attribute of, let's say it's 60 pixels. Sorry, it's only 6. So here even height can be of 60 pixels. And we have an section which contains multiple articles or blog. So we have an article inside which we have an blog image with the source. Let me just copy paste some image URL. So and here I'll also be giving a name for my like I'll be giving an alternative text stating that it's a blog image, and we'll be adding some width of, let me say it's 250 pixels, and height would be around like 150 pixels, and we would be having an h2 header for our blog title, and we would be having some meta description about the blog. So I'll be adding some dummy content for now, and we'll have an anchor link. So I'll be using a dummy link for read more. So it will be redirecting to the full page where you can see more detailed article, and save it. And we also be adding a navigation item, nav element, under which we have multiple anchor elements like home, about, and contact. And let me copy this nav item, as we will be using a menu in our footer as well. So I'll be creating another HTML element called footer, under which I'll just copy paste this nav element. And now let me add another paragraph for my copyright text. Copyright reserved at 2020. Let me save this. So if I open my web page, you can see I have my skeleton. My HTML has given me the skeleton content of the web page. So now let me use an HTML attribute called style to add stylings for each. So stylings can be used to add background color, font, and change some of the default attributes that's been added. For an anchor text, you have an underline here, so we can remove that using the styles. So let me go to my index.html file and go to my header element and add a style attribute. And here I will be stating my background color needs to be turquoise. Let me write an extra code for this. And I want to specify the height of my header element, which would be 60 pixels. Save this. And let me go to my navigation item, create a style attribute, and here I will be adding an padding of 10 pixels from every side, and also move all my text to the center. So we'll be using an style attribute called style text align center, and we'll also be adding a background color for this. So my background color would be a gray color here. So for gray it's and for my anchor element or a link element, we'll be using the font color as white. So I'll be using the style element color white, and let me copy this and add it to all my other elements as well. And for my section, I need to add a space between my navigation element and my section element. So I'll create a style element where I'll add a margin top 30 pixels, and I'll go to my article tab and I'll add a style attribute where I'll specifying the height of the elements needs like 180 pixels, and the background color should be in gray. And let me also add an padding so there is a spacing between all the contents. So let me add in 10 pixels padding, save it, and go to my image and add an style attribute so that I want to push my or the image to my left and my content needs to be at the right. So I'll be using a float style attribute to push the content to the left, float left, and I also want to add a space between my image and the content. So I'll be using a padding right style attribute. So it'll be like 10 pixels. Save it and let me go to my link element and add a style and add a color. Let me add an indigo color. And finally, we have a footer element. Let us add a styling where the background color is somewhat blue. It's blue. And let me add a styling for our anchor tag as well. It needs to be, the color needs to be white. So I'll copy the same style attributes for all my anchor links as well. And I also want my copyright text to be in white. Let me save this. And for the footer, I also want to add an padding of some 15 pixels, and I want to align all the text to the center and save it. And if I go to my, you can see that the difference you can see as it's enormous, right? A basic HTML can only add is it'll only add a skeleton with all the content, but using a style attribute can give you a visual look. It'll totally change the visual look. Let me change some style attributes. As you can see that there is too much spacing here, so I need to reduce the width, like the height of this particular article, and I need to also add a margin at the bottom, and and I also need to add like multiple blog elements. So let me go to my index.html. Let me change the size from 180 to 170, and as I also wanted to add a margin at the bottom, so I'll add margin bottom 15 pixels, save it, and I will copy this particular article tag and paste it like 4 times, and I'll save it. And if I go to my this thing, you can see it's been added, but I also want to add an width element. So I'll go to my section, I'll go to my Visual Studio Code, go to my section and go to my style attribute and add an width style attribute, width of 80%. For aligning it to a center, I'll use a margin. I'll ask the browser to calculate the margin. So I'll see the top and the bottom margin needs to be 0, and the left and the right you calculate and center it. So once I do that, you can see that the browser has decided it and it's moved it around. And you can see here there is a margin top has not been added. Section element, I'll add it as padding because we have defined the margin at the later saying that it's 0. Let me see this. As you can see that we have seen how to use an HTML syntax to create an skeleton, and also I use our style attributes to add stylings to our HTML element. And finally, we have also completed our demo web page. That's it, guys. In the next part, we'll be looking at how to use tables, videos, and other advanced concepts of HTML. Thank you, guys.